Greetings, unsettled souls, and welcome to The Correct Views. This is not an unprofessional podcast. I'm supposed to be going live at 4:30, but I'm actually going live just a little bit early. This St. Louis issue has just broken. I got the behind-the-scenes Queen Christelle setting the show up as we go. Friends, you can text updates to 330-491-6380. That is Change Taxi. Don't be surprised if you see the tag. Thank you, Change Taxi, for giving us an on-air response. We are covering the St. Louis. Thank you, Change Taxi. You're welcome to stay. It's completely up to you, my friend. We are covering the St. Louis issues right now as they happen. Again, the actual broadcast doesn't go live for another 5 minutes, but we're going to go ahead and go with this because it's happening as we are going live here. Fatal officer involved shooting in St. Louis leads to civil unrest. Now, this could be an issue because a lot of you know, obviously, Ferguson has been a nightmare for this. And again, for those of you coming for the Ebola news and the police update news, I am going to get to it. This is something that is breaking as I'm going live. St. Louis, in a press conference held just after 1 a.m., St. Louis police officer Chief Sam Dotson addressed the media about the fatal shooting of an 18-year-old male by an St. Louis officer on the 4100 block of Shaw Boulevard. Supposedly, he was shooting at police officers. That is what we are hearing now. It says that he was shooting towards officers. The reason that I'm wanting to go so very early right now is I'm also getting an update here that from his, I believe his aunt or his relative. Let me check. It says this is from News 1, for those of you that want sources. St. Louis PD, fatally shoot teen. Family claims he was unarmed. Quote, "They shot my Drew 16 times. All he had was a sandwich. It was a victim's aunt, and it was at the scene." Now, we are covering this here at The Correct Views live at the very moment it happens, practically as it's coming in on the stream. It's 4:26 a.m. It says, one of the men approached the officer in an aggressive manner. The officer ordered the man to stop and gave instructions to him to surrender. The man continued to approach the officer till a physical altercation occurred between the two. The suspect ran away from the officer up a hill, turned and fired at least 3 shots at the officer. The officer returned fire, fatally wounding the suspect. That's where you would have a normal thug culture versus civilized man debate. But we've got this other story here that is not the case at all, that he was not armed. This is, again, from News 1. St. Louis PD fatally shot teen. Family claims that he was unarmed. And we're covering it live as quick as it comes into us. Update, as you can see the live stream here at the site I gave you. Officers claim that the suspect turned around and fired on the officer, who was in fear for his life. It says more details below. An officer working the department approved secondary for a security company wearing the St. Louis police officer's uniform was again in the 4100 block of Shaw when he attempted a pedestrian check. The male suspect fled on foot. Why is he doing a pedestrian check? That's another question. Where is our Fourth Amendment? And again, we're not going to talk color here. We don't deal with color. We deal with facts. I don't care what color he was. Why are we stopping people for a pedestrian check? That right there is a breach of the Fourth Amendment, regardless of whether or not this person shot at the officer or not. It said that the suspect here did turn and fired at the officer, but now the family, of course, is saying, as I mentioned earlier, that he was not armed. It said the teen's aunt said that he was shot at least 16 times, which was neither been confirmed nor denied. So that is where we are with that story. We have started The Correct Views just a little bit early to deal with this. For those of you about to tune in at 4:30, or those of you who have tuned in and wonder why I'm already on, don't panic. I'm not starting the other news until 4:30. But we're having issues here in St. Louis, and this is a really bad time. Right now, we need to be unifying to figure out how to combat things like an oppressive government. We need to be getting together to find out how to combat things like Ebola, because Ebola isn't this ambiguous thing. Ebola, contrary to what that idiot Louis Farrakhan would tell you, does not care what color you are. It will just as quickly kill you if you are black as if you are white. So maybe we need to be unifying instead of diversing over these kinds of issues. That, my friends, is definitely the correct views. Again, we're covering this live as it goes. If you want to go ahead and update the show, or you want to put anything on, you're welcome to do so at facebook.com/thecorrectviews, or you can text it to 330-491-6380. That is Change Taxi. Guys, we just switched over to, and I'm using them live. We have just switched over, welcome friends, to the correct views. I have not covered the stories yet. You guys haven't missed anything. I have just covered the St. Louis police shooting. Again, the officers have shot another person around the Ferguson area, and we covered that just a moment ago. Feel free to go ahead and click back and stream for more. Guys, update, well, Change Taxi's owner is in the house. He's letting me use their phone. He will update me as you guys text it to me. We're covering it live. Your replies read on air. We're going to get back to regularly scheduled program, if you will, at the Correct Views. Experts, Ebola could be transmitted at a distance from infected victims. We had a very brave and very noble and very wonderful guest on our show, and it was Mrs. Sawyer. She runs in the Ebola Awareness Network. You can find it on Facebook. Her husband died of Ebola when he was about to come home and see his children, his daughters, for their birthday party. I think he had 3 daughters, and 2 of them were celebrating their birthday at the same time. We interviewed his wife. Again, we're not ambulance chasers. She wants to get the word out. We were doing a service, not a disservice. At the time that we did the interview, I specifically remember her saying that Ebola was not airborne. And when she said that, of course, she was not lying. She's one of the most noble, strong-willed person I've ever seen. But it looks like we are dealing with facts that are contrary to that, because it looks as though this is either a different strain of Ebola or it is, in fact, now airborne. And this is a big deal. And I'll tell you why. When the plague went from non-airborne to airborne, it wiped out a massive number of people throughout Europe in numbers that even Hitler couldn't match, percentage-wise, of course. We are talking about a really big problem here. And there have been studies as far back as 1989 that have showed that animals kept in separate cages, monkeys and pigs, have transferred the virus to another one without ever coming in contact. Now, again, it was a wire cage. That doesn't prove to me, nor you listening, I'm sure, that the virus was airborne. It doesn't prove that at all. Because spittle, in fact, isn't air. It's maybe they sneezed and it got into the other cage, got into the ventilation system, whatever. But that is at least airborne in a very generic definition of the term, if you will. We are looking at full-blown airborne here. And one of the problems is, for those of you that have studied Ebola, you'll be able to leave comments in the comment line, I'm sure, to extrapolate on this further. But a lot of diseases, we know what they live in. By that I mean Ebola doesn't normally infect humans. It doesn't like to infect humans because we die too quickly for it to, quote unquote, get its job done. It would be much more helpful to the Ebola virus if we were to live longer with it, because of course the virus wants to eat and take over, much like communists. The problem here is we don't know where Ebola lives when it's not infecting everybody. We know that it's in certain kinds of bush meat. We know that it's in monkeys, but we don't know where it lives, or for lack of better words, where it hibernates, where it lives when it's not transmissible to people, when it's not creating a massive outbreak, if it is. We don't know where that is, and it's possible that through all the dynamics that I've just spent the last 4 minutes talking about, that this virus has become airborne. That is to say, you can catch it just by being in the same room with someone. For you Chris Brown fans. Professors at the University of Illinois in Chicago assert that the Ebola virus has the potential to be transmitted via infectious aerosol particles both near and at a distance from infected patients, suggesting that the current understanding of Ebola only being communicable via direct contact is inaccurate. In a piece published by CIDRAP, again, there is a link for it here, the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policies authors Dr. Lisa Brousseau and Dr. Rachel Jones highlight how Ebola currently has unclear modes of transportation. We believe that there is scientific and epidemiological evidence that the Ebola virus has the potential to be transmitted via infectious aerosol particles both near and at a distance from infected patients. To put it in layman's terms, just by breathing, you can catch it. That means that healthcare workers should be wearing respirators and not face masks, states the article. So again, if you see somebody in a face mask and they think it's protecting them from Ebola, it does nothing in an airborne arena, which we are looking at here. It goes on that making reference to controversy about whether Ebola virus can be transmitted via aerosols, the authors assert that the current understanding that Ebola can only be transmitted by direct contact with the virus-laden fluids is incorrect and outmoded. The authors note that U.S. health professionals currently tackling Ebola are being put at risk because of the failure to offer them proper respiratory protection, making reference to hundreds of fatalities of Ebola health workers in West Africa due to face masks or surgical masks. So basically, they're not wearing enough protection is what it is. And it makes you wonder, when Obama has done nothing to stop the spread of Ebola, do you realize the only thing they're doing right now is checking for your temperature? We'll get to that in a moment. There's absolutely nothing at all that we're doing to stop it. It makes you wonder if the crazies out there that say that the government wants us dead, it makes you wonder if the lunatics and the tin hat wearers, if you will, it makes you wonder when they talk about eugenics. Look up the history of eugenics. There's a lot of people who are in office today that have written papers praising eugenics. You can find this information easily online. Am I saying that they caused this? We don't have proof of that yet. So the correct views doesn't go and venture in hypotheses, but we'll do this. We'll say that I'm going to go on record for saying I wouldn't be surprised if facts came out that said that they won't let a good disaster go to waste. It says, being the first skeptical that Ebola virus could be aerosol transmissible disease, that is to say breathing, we are now persuaded by a review of experimental and epidemiologic data that this might be an important feature of disease transmission. In other words, a really good way to catch it. Earlier, Anthony Bradbury, and there's a link for this too, at the United Nations Ebola response chief, warned of the nightmare scenario that Ebola could go airborne as a result of mutation. It says the longer it moves around in human hosts in a virulent melting pot in West Africa, the more chances increase that it could mutate. It's a nightmare scenario and unlikely, but it can't be ruled out. Well, I don't think it's very unlikely when we're looking at things like this. The emergency manager calls the federal Ebola response a stand down. Why is he saying that? Well, it might be because, they ordered sheriffs into the gentleman's house in Texas who had Ebola. They ordered sheriffs into his home. That one of those officers, I think it's the sheriff himself, now has symptoms and will likely be by the morning when you're hearing this, likely confirmed as Ebola. Very probable to say the least. Basically, they gave him Ebola. They're not following any of the protocols to stop the disease from spreading. It almost looks as if they are doing it on purpose. Kit Daniels, Prison Planet, emergency manager again calls federal Ebola response a stand down. The numerous violations of disease protocol surrounding the Dallas, Texas Ebola case are intentional, according to an emergency response manager. Well, I think it might be when you remember that it's taken days for them to clear the apartment building. They should have raised the apartment building, bleached it all out, and given those other people safer places to live. Is that overkill? Yes, it is. And as they mention in here, let's do some overkill. Let's make sure that this virus does not become one of the plagues of the Bible. How about that? They had people cleaning up his vomit without any protection at all, with just mops. The average person listening to this doesn't need to be a doctor to know that this is bad. It says the manager, who was involved in the emergency response of both Hurricane Katrina and Rita, in addition to planning for smallpox outbreaks, said the official response to the first diagnosed case of Ebola in the United States on purpose avoided the basic actions the government would take to prevent the virus from spreading. To say the least. To say the absolute least, do you know they hauled a homeless man in the same ambulance that took the now deceased Ebola victim to the hospital without cleaning the ambulance first? Do you know that? The reason I know the Ebola outbreak is being conducted on purpose is because it violates all protocol, he said. The violations of protocol are almost too numerous to even mention. For one thing, government officials were slow to decontaminate the apartment of Thomas Eric Duncan, again, RIP, the 40-year-old Liberian national who was at first diagnosed case of Ebola in the U.S. Now, we have people wondering why the CDC doesn't shut down transportation. I agree. Now, having said that, if the health workers do not mind going to set up hospitals and what looks like MASH units, for lack of better words, and things like it, then they should be allowed to go. They should be quarantined and they should be allowed to come home. Common sense. But as above and beyond that, you should not be allowed to travel to these countries. It should have been shut down long ago. Again, the correct views is not in favor of shutting down voluntary aid. Nor am I in favor of making the aid workers live in that country forever. They need to be quarantined for their 21 or 91 or whatever it is days and then allowed to return home. Again, free advice here from the correct views. No less than 100 days of wearing a condom after Ebola is clear. Look it up. Before the apartment was sanitized, however, 5 Dallas County Sheriff's deputies were ordered into the apartment unit without protective gear to remove the Duncan family members who were placed under quarantine. Again, one of those officers is now sick. Dallas County Sheriff Association Christopher Dreyer said the deputies were uncomfortable with the order. They're very concerned, Dreyer said, and WFAA.8, their families are concerned. They've got to go home and tell their spouse, hey, I was just inside the house where a guy had Ebola. The workers were ordered to clean the sidewalk where Duncan vomited with Ebola and not wearing any protective clothing. We do not know the status on them at this time. And like Duncan's apartment, officials were slow to decontaminate the ambulance. The ambulance was transported Duncan to the hospital, meaning that the homeless man was also transported in the ambulance after Duncan was potentially exposed to the disease. We got one more concern on the Ebola update. We do have texting on the earlier story or not? All right. Last thing I want to get to then before we go ahead and do that. CDC director, Ebola travel ban will only make it worse. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Listen to what this bonehead said. U.S. refuses to stop flights to other nations, halt the influx of potential Ebola patients. A travel ban to countries facing an Ebola outbreak could paradoxically make the problem worse. Might I add, lied. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Tom Frieden said during the press conference, one of his arguments is that by shutting down all travel, you're making the problem worse because America's best minds can't stop it. Common sense. You don't let me, Christelle, you don't let us go to Liberia because we don't know what the hell we're doing there. We're just going to get ourselves sick. We're going to kill half our country. But if you are somebody that actually knows what you are doing, then you should be allowed to go there and help. And there should be a travel ban on everything else. Guys, common sense rules the end of the day. Go ahead, Kenny, and come on in real quick. For those of you waiting for the massive police state update, that is coming right after this real quick break. Go ahead and scoot in enough that you can see yourself. Local businesses be praised. Chains Taxi, friends. It said, we are the cheapest in town. But by town, he means like all of Northeastern Ohio. Kenny, say hi to everybody on the Correct Views. Welcome aboard.
Good evening, everybody.
All right, so it says it's 330-491-6380. Taxi delivery, moving errands, and more. What all do you guys do, and how can people get a hold of you?
We do just about anything that involves a vehicle. We are trying to help the community and save them money.
Wonderful. And what is the general area? Like, where are most of your drivers located?
Northeast Ohio at this time, expanding to PA and a few other states within the next year.
All right, guys, so it is not just local to Northeastern Ohio. Friends, 330-491-6380. Anything you want to say before you jump off?
And that's it. No.
All right, guys, give him a call. You met the owner. Go ahead and talk to him. Call him. He will make sure that you get a cab and that you get it quickly. Friends, we're going to move on to our police state news. Alan Salazar, PrisonPlanet.com. FBI investigates teen in coma after cop deploys taser during routine traffic stop. What is with the police state going out of control in this country? It says a 17-year-old boy went into a coma and is in critical condition after a Missouri police officer tasered him into compliance during a routine traffic stop. The FBI has been called on to investigate the incident following the issuance of police statements which conflict with eyewitness testimony and video of the arrest. On Sunday afternoon, Independence police officer Tim Reynolds ran Kansas City teen Bryce Masters' plates and discovered a warrant violation. When the officer approached Masters' car, police say that he refused to roll down the vehicle's window. A friend told news outlets that Masters was unable to roll down the window due to a malfunction. And I've had cars like that, so far I'm believing him because I've owned more than one car like that. Who's with me? The officer then opened Masters' door and reportedly ordered him out of the vehicle, a request that they say Masters did not oblige. The officer then proceeded to taser the teen inside the vehicle. The driver still refused to roll down the window. The officer was able to get the door open. The driver refused to get out of the vehicle. A struggle ensued. A taser was employed by the officer, according to a statement from the Independent Sergeant Daryl Schmidli, SCHMIDI. The confrontation continued outside the car, and both Masters and Reynolds fell to the ground. Reports the Associated Press, adding that Masters then suffered a medical emergency and needed resuscitation, prompting a call for an ambulance, police said. Masters' brother Colin told KSHB that his family believes he may have stopped breathing for more than 5 minutes. So it doesn't look like he got expedient care. Witnesses say they heard the teen scream, then saw the officer drag Masters from his car, handcuffed him, and didn't break his fall, leading him to hit his face on the concrete. So if you don't immediately comply with what your Nazi leaders want, they'll smash your face into the ground. His head hit the pavement, says in the driveway, another witness told Kansas City Star. I was horrified by the whole situation and the way it came down. After Masters' head slammed against the pavement, witnesses say his body went into convulsions before the officer pressed his boot against the boy, as if to put out a cigarette butt. Well, that's how you protect and serve. Several times, the cop put his foot on the kid like he was stepping on his neck, but it was on his back, writes witness Robert Baker. I think the officer was wrong because the kid tried to explain to him that his window wouldn't roll down. It says there were significant inconsistencies according to the family. I bet there is. I'm sure there is. So hopefully we will find out before long whether or not this is going to be a lawsuit of biblical proportions. We can only hope, because if we sue cities for this, then mayors will clamp down on this rather quickly. And as most fellow libertarian-minded people know, it's better for the mayor to crack down than the federal government. More police update. This is from photographyisnotacrime.com. Tucson cop leaves photographer hospitalized after claiming he was blinded by the flash. It's any excuse at all to take away what is your God-given First Amendment right to film them. It says, with more than 2 decades of police experience under his belt, you would think that Tucson police officer Bobby Nilsson would be able to conduct his job without being distracted by a mere camera flash, especially when he's shining a powerful flashing into the photographer's lenses. So the cop had the bright light first. But then again, with more than 2 decades of police experience, Nilsson has learned to manipulate the truth to his advantage, that is to say, lie, which is what he tried to do last week when snatching 2 cameras out of a man's hands after claiming he was blinded with the flash. Look into the camera. The incident left Raymond Roden hospitalized with a whiplash injury to his neck, an official diagnosis of cervical radiopathy, a result of Nilsson yanking the camera so hard that the camera strap left him with a herniated disc. The truth is, it said Rodden did not discharge the flash because he was recording a video on a Canon 615 and an iPhone. The flash becomes inoperable on the Canon when shooting video, and while it's technically possible to use a flash while recording with the iPhone, or read the comments, it may require another set of hands to do it while holding the camera in each hand. In other words, he's been double proved to have lied. Besides, the argument is stupid because even if he did use the flash, it would not have been illegal to do so, and it would not have been enough to blind the cop who was standing 10 full feet away as Rodden was trying to record another cop conducting a DUI investigation, which I argue they also should not be allowed to do. The blinded by the flash routine is a time-honored lie. It says that among cops who arrest photographers preceding the more recent camera could be a gun routine, which is also a lie. It was slipped into reports the first 2 times I was arrested for photographing cops, writes the author of the story. It says, prior to snatching Roden's cameras, Nilsson spent several minutes shining his flashlight at him, essentially blinding him, giving him the warning, if the flash goes off, I own the camera. It's going to be in my eyes. It's going to interfere. Well, maybe you should take the camera out of the person's eyes who has his First Amendment right to film you. Friends, Kurt Nemo, Prison Planet Video. Cop insists travel is a privilege granted by the state. God rest my father's soul. He used to say that, and I disagree vehemently, and I like this article because it proves why. It says, back when the Constitution was drafted, the founders did not explicitly include the right to travel. Although the Articles of Confederation recognized the freedom of movement under Article 4, the founders considered the right so fundamental that they felt it did not need specific enumeration into the Constitution. In other words, your freedom of movement is given via common sense in Article 4 of the Constitution, if you know how to read. So essential was the natural right of travel and freedom of movement considered. It was spelled out in Article 42 of the Magna Carta way back in 1215. On numerous occasions, the Supreme Court has ruled individuals have the right to travel and not be accosted by the state and its agents, that is to say, cops. The right of the citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon, that is to bring things with you, either by carriage or by automobile, is not a mere privilege which the city may prohibit at will, but a common right, R-I-G-H-T, which he has under the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The court ruled in Thompson versus Smith. So don't tell me it's a privilege. The right to travel, right, not privilege, is a part of the liberty of which the citizen cannot be deprived without due process of law under the Fifth Amendment. It was decided in Kent versus Dulles, D-U-L-L-E-S. Undoubtedly, the right of locomotion, the right to move from one place to another, it says, according to inclination, is an attribute of personal liberty, and the right ordinarily of free transit from or through the territory of any state It is a right secured by the Fourth Amendment and by other provisions of the Constitution. That is according to Schlockman versus Doles. Government, in requiring the people to file for driver's license, vehicle registrations, mandatory insurance, and demanding that they stop for vehicle inspections, roadblocks, etc., are restricting and therefore violating the rights of people's common law to travel. In other words, am I saying that you shouldn't have to have a license to drive? Yes, that is what I'm saying. If you're a danger to anyone, we already have laws against you being a danger to someone. It is your right to drive without a license. And if we had more people standing up for it the way I am right now, then we'd have enough people doing it. How do you do it? You gather a whole lot of people in one state and you all refuse to buy your vehicle registrations and your insurance and stop for checkpoints. You get half of the working population in any state to do it, and they won't be able to do anything about it. They can't arrest you all. They don't have the space. And if they did, you can't shut down half the working population in the state and still have a working state. That is how you rebel, friends. It says, so eroded is the concept of individual God-given rights that the police now consider the concept not only alien and antagonistic, but grounds for not only verbally abusing citizens, but injuring and increasingly killing them for daring to question their authority. You have a right to travel. Guys, 2 more stories here in our police update, including the Dundee of the day, so don't leave. Photography is not a crime. Pennsylvania cop sued for storming home and arresting woman for video recording. This is what happens when you find some balls and you fight. Pennsylvania cops told a woman that if she did not stop video recording them arresting her daughter outside their home, they would arrest her for felony wiretapping. The woman stepped inside her home to continue recording, which was when police stormed inside without a warrant and arrested her. You don't have the right to come into my home, Kia Gaiman can be heard telling Collingdale police officer Carl White as he enters her home. And she is right, he is wrong. I do, White responds, a man who clearly believes that he is above the law. He is not. However, police ended up charging her with disorderly conduct and did nothing but a catch-all contempt of cop charge they use when they can't find any actual law in the book that was broken, which doesn't say anything about video recording police against their wishes, which you are allowed to do. And that charge was tossed out along with disorderly conduct against Gaiman's daughter. Now the family is suing the Collingdale Police Department over the incident, which took place in February of 2014, and God willing, they will win. It says it all began when the neighbor called police because a family member had parked a car with the front tire on the neighbor's curb. What a dumb reason to call anyway. Police arrived and accused the family of having spit at the neighbor. The family denied the accusation, which prompted the police to yell at them. So, of course, it was accused. The police think they're a judge and jury and they know what happened. Gaiman pulled out her camera and began recording, and that's when cops told her that it was a felony. It is not a felony, and you can look at all of the court documents that are posted here at Photography is not a crime, and you can see why, in fact, you're going to find out real quick that the PA police are going to be sued blind for this. That brings us to the dumdy of the day. Man staring at iPad causes airport evacuation. Friends, the Dumdy of the Day is brought to you by the ever-loving people at the Seacrest Motel. When you go to the Seacrest Motel, make sure you tell Vicky that you heard about it at TCV. When you do, you're going to save a fortune. And I know where you're going. You're going to Cedar Point. So when you see me, make sure you say, what's up? Make sure you stay at the Seacrest Motel. Friends, it says, you know how embarrassed you feel when you walk down the street staring down at your phone and bump into someone. Oh, you're not embarrassed about that at all? It asks, well, 1 or 2 people still are, and I am here to help them understand that it could be worse. On Saturday morning, a man got off a plane at Sydney Airport in Australia and was so enchanted by the fascinating content of his iPad that he walked into a domestic terminal without bothering to go through security. This event was captured on CCTV and unnerved officials so much that they evacuated passengers. An iPad! Oh! The Sydney Morning Herald reported the man found himself, or perhaps didn't, going into the terminal through an exit passage that clearly was convenient for him, but less convenient to the hordes of passengers who not only had to be removed from Terminal 3, but also rescreened. It says the spokesman for the Qantas told the Morning Herald the man disembarked a flight and left. It appears he wasn't paying attention and was looking at his iPad, forgot something, and walked back past the security area. Flights were delayed for around an hour. I don't even know who gets the dumdy, the people that shut the airport down or the man himself. It says the man who, and I would pick on him if he was, has not been publicly identified, left the airport without further harm being done. One wonders, though, whether he really needed to be staring at his iPad quite so intently. Well, let me add, the part of the dumdy goes to the airlines. If airlines did not charge you to use their internet, and rather gave it to you freely, which would not cost them that much, if they weren't greedy bastards that did that, then you wouldn't be so quick to check your cell phone and your iPad the moment you get off the plane when you have something important to do, like I did when my mother was sick and I was traveling. So part of this dumdy of the day goes to the freaking airline that's a bunch of greedy, filthy swines. One also wonders about the security at the Sydney airport. Australia is currently under high alert after its Prime Minister Tony Abbott declared that a terrorist attack on the country was likely. Friends, you're listening to the correct views. Too many dummies to even mention. Thank you for tuning in. Do me a favor, go to themediaspeaks.com, look up the work of Kyle Court, D-Like, and myself. When you do, make sure you give them a thumbs up for the work that they're doing. And if you like my show, I'm trying to get this syndicated onto other radio stations. I'm trying to make this what I do full time. I've got a face for radio, if you will. So if you can make that happen, please do. If you'd like to donate to the show, you can do so at thecorrectviews@hotmail.com. Every penny you give to me goes towards a better show. Good night, friends. God bless. And thank you again to Change Taxi 330-491-6380, who on the fly let me use their texting services to go live with this St. Louis story. Thank you, friends. Good night. God bless.